Is communion symbolic, an ordinance, a sacrament, a memorial, or all of the above? Does it even matter? The argument begins with a simple word, is. Those who remember the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal may remember that famous line, "It depends on what the meaning of the word is." What did Jesus mean by the word is when he introduced communion? As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It's poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many." A common explanation for saying this is only symbolic is that Jesus also said, "I'm the light of the world, I'm the door of the sheep, I'm the resurrection and the life, I'm the good shepherd, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and I'm the true vine." This is a reasonable explanation, but can it be both symbolic and a sacrament? What about theories that go way beyond what the Bible actually teaches? Is Jesus somehow present in the bread and wine? Or do they transubstantiate into his literal body and blood? Does symbolism exclude us from also receiving a sacred blessing or divine grace as we partake of the bread and cup? If we understand the simple meaning of the word sacrament, rather than overly complicate the idea, then we can open our hearts to include God's spiritual blessing along with the physical elements of communion. Some Protestants may be offended by other doctrines associated with the word sacrament. Can we examine the word sacrament in isolation for a moment? The word sacrament is not preferred by some Protestants, basically because of different understandings of what the word means. It's not a biblical word, but the concept of a sacred act that God blesses spiritually is certainly biblical. The origin of the word is in the Eastern Church, referring to the mystery of the gospel and God's mysterious involvement in physical acts. Pray also for me, that the message may be given to me when I open my mouth, to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel. The Western Church more often uses the word sacrament rather than mystery. An early understanding of a sacrament was a physical act through which God imparted a divine blessing. Some say that therefore all of life's a sacrament. The formal number of sacraments was gradually reduced to 7 in the Western Church. Protestants usually only accept 2, baptism and communion. Some Protestants prefer to call these ordinances rather than sacraments. Others suggest that foot washing ought to be included as a sacrament because Jesus commanded it. This reveals the flaw of a narrow definition of sacrament as something Jesus directly or indirectly commanded. Discussion has basically ceased. Respective positions have hardened, and very few are open to thinking outside these man-made doctrinal walls. So some Protestants are comfortable with the word sacrament and others are not. It all depends on definition. Though baptism and communion are universally recognized as essentials of our common faith, the word sacrament is probably a non-essential. All would accept the idea behind it of receiving a divine blessing while performing physical acts in obedience to Christ. Is baptism symbolic or sacramental? Depending on definition, it can be both. Quakers and Salvation Army have not traditionally partaken of the bread and cup, though that's possibly changing. Is this their traditional stance, potentially disobedient to Jesus? Was this command to the disciples also, by extension, a command to us? Do this in memory of me. What did Jesus say? And when he'd given thanks, He broke it and said, "Take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." As we examine these words, we notice several things. Jesus gave thanks, so calling communion the Eucharist or Thanksgiving is appropriate. It's appropriately called the Great Thanksgiving. It's a mystery. What does the word "is" mean? Is it just symbolic, or also that and more? It's a sacrament. In the simplest meaning of that word, divine blessings come to those who obey Jesus in physical things. It's an ordinance. Jesus said to the disciples, "Do this." Why refuse to do this? It's a memorial. Jesus said, "In remembrance of me." It's repeatable. Jesus said, "As often." He just didn't say how often. Do you partake of communion expecting a blessing from heaven, or just go through the motions as symbolic alone? Do you reject Jesus' instructions by just spiritualizing the rite away? Do you obey men or Jesus? You decide.